One thing is clear that China is not going to grow very high. China grew at the rate of double digits for more than 3 decades. And that kind of growth cannot be sustained. And therefore, it is supposed to come down. But please also look at how China's export is growing. China realized that they are going to have a demographic problem because of their one-child norm that they had. If unemployment is increasing and the number of people to seeking employment is decreasing, how is it going to play out in the long run? If you look at China today, he has actually opened up too many fronts. He has opened up South China Sea. His relations with the US is still on the mend. It's not mended correctly as yet. You have the One Belt One Road initiative, which is running into trouble. You have already a India border, which is already in question. So you have too many fronts to actually open up with. If Chinese are to become world power, you have to have presence all across the world. If you don't have that, then you will not be able to influence incident that could happen anywhere. Like for example, today if you look at the US, it has got 800 bases, small and big, all over the world. CPEC was, to my way of thinking, is not a project which was meant for economic benefits of China. To my way of thinking, it is another access to Arabian Sea. That is what they are more important. Even now, that since the line of actual control is not mutually accepted by both the sides, face-offs might occur even in future, and we need to be careful about it. See, we have made one thing clear to the Chinese side, that unless we have some stability on the line of actual control, and we go back to the pre-2020 incident positions, and we go through the 3 process of disengagement, de-escalation, and then moving back, things are not going to move politically.
Namaste, Jai Hind. Welcome to another edition of ANI Podcast with Smita Prakash. Thank you for liking or subscribing to the channel. Our topic today is all things China. Our guest today is Lieutenant General S.L. Narasimhan, who served as Defense Attaché in the Indian Embassy in China for 3 years. He's qualified in the Chinese language and has been a keen observer of China for the past 18 years. So as you would have guessed, what we will discuss today is the relationship between India and China, which has been complex to say the least. An unresolved border dispute on the one hand, and on the other, a steadily deepening economic engagement. The problem about understanding China is the secrecy under which the country operates. In the podcast today is also my colleague at ANI, the National Security Editor Ajit Dubey. General Narasimhan, thank you so much for being part of the podcast. Ajit and I are very happy that you're here today, though it's a very cold weather compared to Coimbatore. But obviously, we want to ask you everything about China since you're a China watcher. I'd begin by asking you about the stories which are coming in the media about the Chinese growth engine hitting a speed breaker. Is this true, and what do you have to say as to why do you think it happened?
Firstly, thank you very much for having me on the podcast. And Ajit and I go sometime back when I was ADGPA, he was covering defense at that time. And it's always a pleasure to be on this podcast.
Thank you so much.
I'm also happy that you didn't call me a China expert.
Why is that?
Because I personally feel that for anybody to feel expert on China is going to be a bit difficult to justify that, basically because that country surprises all the time, everybody. So China watcher is a better word to use, and I'm happy that you used it.
Before you go further, I want to tell you why. Because I heard once a podcast in America when I was listening in, and there was this lady who said that she'd been watching China. She's an academic, and she'd been watching China and writing about it, reading about it. She'd studied China for almost 2 decades. But she says that there were things which happened in 2023, rather from 2020 to 2023, which she never expected. So she said the same thing, that you can never know enough to be an expert on China.
I fully agree, because I've been watching China for 23 years now. But I also feel the same way, that it could surprise you at any point in time. That is the reason I mentioned that.
Right, sir.
Coming to your question, first thing is, most of the analysis that comes out now, particularly on the economic growth of China, which has slowed down, is based on the premise that certain things have happened in the recent past. One is the real estate crisis that they got into. Second is the unemployment issues that they have. Third is the lack of domestic consumption, which they wanted to boost is not happening. So because of these reasons, they seem to be thinking that China's growth rate is going to go down, and it is. There are some people who have also written to say that China's growth has already peaked and from here it will only go down. There are some others who have said that, this was expected. Like, for example, China grew at the rate of double digits for more than 3 decades, and that kind of growth cannot be sustained, and therefore it is supposed to come down. Some writings about 6-7 years ago, if you read, you will find that they had already predicted that China's growth will come down to approximately 3 to 4% around 2030. So this is a path which they had actually predicted. But the problem happened with COVID pandemic. The COVID pandemic brought in fresh kind of problems for China, and that has created some more issues. Even after having all this, China has grown 5.2% this year, which is not a very, I would say, a small size growth. And we need to keep in mind that China is growing on $17 trillion economy, and 5.2% is approximately comes to about $850 billion, which is reasonable amount of growth. But that is not adequate for China, because China is used to growing at a higher rate, and so that is the reason why there is a slowdown. The second problem that they have found very recently, on the real estate sector, what they are trying to do is basically that sector was over leveraged. So therefore, they had a feeling that they should look at this sector a little more critically. And what they have been doing now is, once that Evergrande issue happened, today actually Hong Kong court has ruled that Evergrande should shut down. That is a ruling that has come out of Hong Kong today. But what they have been doing is to find ways and means of sustaining this real estate sector a little bit, because real estate sector contributes to 29% of GDP of China. So they can't let such a large volume of a sector go down very quickly. So what they have been trying to do is to give some kind of leverage, some kind of facilities to either postpone these loan payments, etc., rescheduling of the loans, etc. They have been trying to do. Recently, there was a report that the Chinese banks have actually shortlisted about 50-odd companies which are eligible for loans or funding to be given to them, so that the real estate can catch up again. So real estate is something that they are trying to look into, but I think they'll allow it to play itself out of the trouble over a period of time is what some analysts have already written. The other thing that you get to see is, the feeling why people feel that China has not grown very well and is into trouble is also because the FDI is reducing into China. The foreign direct investment reducing into China. But then the other argument is that does China need foreign direct investment now? Because the domestic consumption has not increased. So what people are doing is people are saving. So that saving is already available to China to deploy wherever they want to deploy. And so FDI is a thing that probably may or may not be required by China. So if you actually look at all this in its holistic view, one thing is clear, that China is not going to grow very high. China is going to either grow around this level, because next year they are predicting around 4.5. So somewhere around 2030 and beyond, it will come down and stabilize around 3 to 4% is what I personally feel. So that is the way I see China's economy moving ahead.
So if its economy is not going to do as well as they thought they would, or the world thought it would, then is it not destined to lead the world as Xi's dream was?
Xi's dream is to achieve this by 2049. That is the second centenary goal that China has got, wherein by 2049 they want to become a world power. Okay,
the only power.
That they have not said in their articulations. They have not said that they'll be the only power, because that they'll never say it.
Correct.
Even though they want to be one, but they may not say it. But they want to become a world power by 2049. So they have a period of approximately, starting from now, about 25 years to do what they want to do with that particular thing. And not only the economic growth, even if you look at the military reforms and the military reform that have been going on and the effort on increasing the jointness and the integrated operations and amphibious operations, etc., you find that is going to be time consuming. All these are going to take time. So what comes to one's mind based on your question on whether they'll be able to lead, I would like you to look at only the growth of US and other developed economies. None of them grow very high percentages.
Correct.
This year, US has grown 2.5%.
Yeah.
Okay.
So compare that with 4.
Compare that with 5.2%. But only difference will be US grew on $27 trillion, 2.5%,
Okay.
whereas China grew on 5.2% on $17 trillion. There will be some adjustment that you need to do for that. Based on all this, even if you see, none of the developed economies grow beyond 3 to 4% in a year. And look at Germany this year. It's also not doing too well. None of the economies are really doing too well. So these are the years probably we are going through a lot of difficulties in the post-COVID session, etc. But please also look at how China's export is growing. Okay, while domestic demand is not actually picked up, the exports are growing. But of course, exports today only the National Bureau of Statistics reports have come out. They say that since last year, compared to last year, exports have reduced by 5%, is what they have said. But how is China making up this GDP? China is making up this GDP. If the domestic consumption is not picking up, it is making it up by exporting. So therefore, the export model, which they wanted to avoid over a period of time, is still not happening. They wanted to avoid exporting so that the shocks of the world do not affect their growth. That is not happening. So they need to work around that. They are working out some schemes, etc. But how they will be effective is something that we'll have to wait and watch.
So let's go back to China's internal situation because, when we talk about conflicts that China is engaged in, we also need to talk about their dismal demographic situation. Here's a short primer. Reports are coming in about rapid aging of Chinese society or the growing reluctance of women and couples to have children, deaths outpacing births, and a corresponding decline in the number of young working-age couple and a boom in retirees. All this leading to a problem about funding chronic illness care, nursing homes, and general retirement. It feels like there is a crushing burden to the country's leaders, especially with economic growth already slowing down. That was a short primer for people who may not know about this. But sir, I want to come back to this as to, do you think that this is impacting on China's foreign policy?
This is a good question because this has been actually working in the minds of a lot of people who are watching China. Okay, today morning I was speaking to somebody again in one of the meetings I had. China realized that they are going to have a demographic problem because of their one-child norm that they had some time ago. In 2015 onwards, they have been trying to ease the childbearing norms in China.
Yeah.
But the problem that the Chinese government landed with is that the people were not keen on getting more children.
Yeah, you can tell people don't have children, but what is the incentive have more?
The problem was,
Yeah.
the problem why the couples were not actually taking on that line of having more children, though of course there are some couples who have gone for more children, but cost of bringing up a child in China was getting higher. So if your income was not, if both husband and wife are working and then they were trying to sustain 4 of their parents, and you have one child and you want to have one more child, then it was becoming a problem. That is why you find a lot of things which Mr. Xi Jinping did in 2021, banning tuitions, etc., tuition companies and other things, etc., was basically to ease the cost of bringing up the child. Notwithstanding that, they have been trying to do this over a period of time to overcome this problem, but they have not been successful. Last 2 years, the replacement levels have not been reached. For replacement levels, you need to have 2.1% growth every year. That has not happened. So that is a clear indication that the population is going to decline over a period of time. A rough back of the envelope calculation will tell you somewhere around 2050-60, you will have 600 to 700 million people in China who will be above 60, who needs to be looked after. There are 2 ways of looking at it. One is, like you said, their children have to look after them. That is one point. The other point, the state has to look for support for the elderly people in terms of pension schemes and things like that. China's pension scheme has not been working very well. The returns have not been very high. So they have an issue there that they need to deal with. The other thing is the children are actually already having the burden. They are allowed to have more burden. So this is one aspect of it. Compare this with unemployment. Now today, in the 16 to 24 age group, you find unemployment is approximately up to 20%. The latest report says 14.2%. For about 1 year, it was on 21%. Such a large percentage of youth not getting employed is going to give you problems. Okay. On one hand, your population is reducing. On the other hand, your unemployment is existing. This study needs to be made. I don't think anybody has studied this together. If unemployment is increasing and the number of people to seeking employment is decreasing, how is it going to play out in the long run? That, I think, is a detailed study that needs to be made. We have not done it as yet. That may give you some leverage to say that unemployment may not be so high, and even the demographic thing may probably cancel this to some extent at some point in time. It may or may not happen. That study needs to be done. But notwithstanding this, in the run-up to this 2049, this is going to be a problem for China. You will not have skilled labor. You will have less people looking at employment. In addition to that, there is another phenomenon which we get to see in China today. That is known as thangping. Thangping is just lying flat. I don't want to do any work. Okay, this is a tendency you get to see in the net. If you go, you will see this. This, and then they call something known as involution.
No, what is this thing? This is what, like a general strike? I don't want to work.
It's not a general strike. It is just a youth just not wanting to do work.
Why?
Just like that, they want to relax.
But they get money.
Point is, if I have money to eat today, why am I running around? And similarly, the other way the young people are looking at in China is what they call as Neichuan. That is involution, in the sense that why am I running into this competition? It's a rat race. I am actually running hard to stay at the same place. Employment opportunities are not there. Why should I do this? That is the second way of looking at it. So you find such tendencies coming up in the youth in China. So that is something again which is worrying. In fact, the Communist Party statements and Mr. Xi Jinping himself is on record to say that people should not do this.
So will they take in more people in the standing army? Because right now we used to read that because of the one-child policy, they don't have that the standing army. They don't have replacements for their troops. Do you think that they would have more people joining?
That I don't know. That may not be a correct statement to make. The PLA was never finding it short to get people.
Okay.
What they were running short was to get people with degrees and above qualifications. They had given a lot of incentives for those kind of graduates to come and join the PLA, and that they have been giving even incentives now. You come and do work in the PLA, you go back, master's degree will be able to give you a seat, etc., etc. A lot of incentives are being given to get people. The problem of conscription, which you are actually mentioning, is actually that you get to see in many countries. Today, Taiwan was having a conscription of only 4 months. Now they increased it to 8 months.
But that's because of the threat perception from China, right?
No, but then it should not be 4 then. In that case, it should be a longer period of training for you. But they were doing 4 months actually conscription. That means in a year, only 4 months they do training. The army does training. And then thereafter they go into the civilian field. So that kind of a thing may not work very well for what happened in Russia, Ukraine. Russian army had 1 year conscription. That you find that it was not adequate during this war which is taking place. So, notwithstanding what we are saying, the PLA is still going through the conscription process. What they have done now is to increase the recruitment from once a year to twice a year. That they are doing already. They've started doing that. So, they will overcome that particular problem. I don't think recruitment into PLA is going to be a major problem.
They need a war to keep their soldiers busy? Taiwan is watching that.
I know where your question is leading me to, but the question is, lot of people have written about this. At least in India, I've seen people writing that, in case he wants a diversion from internal issues, or in case he wants experience for this PLA, he might do something on the border. But my own reading is of China and the Chinese people is that they are practical, number one. Number two, they need something of an assurance of victory. That is number two.
Every country that goes to war needs that.
Of course. At least a fair chance of victory. Let me put it this way. And the third thing is that, if you look at China today, he has actually opened up too many fronts. He has opened up South China Sea. His relations with the US is still on the mend. It's not mended correctly as yet. You have the One Belt One Road initiative, which is running into trouble. You have already a India border, which is already in question. So you have too many fronts to actually open up with. So to say that he will probably launch something for experience, I would say may not be correct.
So you are saying the Chinese people, military, everybody, the leadership, they are practical. So why do you think they did what they did in 2020? The aggression.
2020, what happened was, I would say that it is a face-off that escalated, and it escalated beyond our expectations, basically because for the first time in 45 years we suffered casualties in 2020. To that extent it happened, and Chinese came in 4 places, as you are aware and as ma'am is also aware. The issue that comes up is that it happened. Then Yangtze happened in December 22, but Yangtze was a case which is actually an older case which is which happened again.
Yeah.
But beyond that, Galwan, if you look at, you have what is happening on that border today is that China is increasing its infrastructure. The additional troops which had come into that area have remained in that area.
Yeah.
That is what the talks are going on even today after 20 rounds of talks. That thing is not complete as yet. So to that extent, if you see that it is a face-off that went out of control, I would put it that way. Out of the 4 areas that they had come in, they have pulled back in some areas. The disengagement has taken place in 4 points, which you are aware. Other than that, of course, 2 other points are under negotiations even now. So if you look at it, I think it is a thing which went out of control. I'm saying even now that since the line of actual control is not mutually accepted by both the sides, face-offs might occur even in future, and we need to be careful about it. This is what I've been saying right from 2020 when I went on the interviews many times that time. Onwards, I've been saying this, that we need to be careful and we need to be cautious. We need to be looking after the LAC very, very closely.
You spoke about the Belt Road Initiative. If you keep that in perspective as to, it was an ambitious project, but at that time they didn't probably know that the roadblocks that will come to their economy. Do you think they were over ambitious with the Belt Road Initiative? And do you think that Xi will take a back seat on this? Now he will go slow on the BRI?
Okay. On the One Belt One Road initiative, I call it One Belt One Road.
Okay.
One Belt One Road initiative initially started in 2013 when he announced in the Nur Sultan Nazarbayev University in Kazakhstan. And then it started. The thing that we saw around that time was any project that China was doing was clubbed into One Belt One Road initiative. Any project in any country that they were doing, everything was getting clubbed into One Belt One Road initiative. Yeah. And they started with lot of gusto, and then they put in a lot of money. So far, my understanding and calculation is that they've invested approximately about $1 trillion into that project. But if you look at the investments starting from 2019-20 onwards, you find there is a downward trend in the investments in One Belt One Road initiative. The reasons are 2. One is that China's economy itself is not doing so well, and so they won't have probably put so much of money. 2, there was some pushback from some countries on some projects. Like Malaysia initially said they don't want that project, then they went renegotiated and given it, etc. While many countries are having this pushback kind of a thing to renegotiate the loans, rescheduling of the returning of the money to the Chinese government, etc., one thing which strikes me is that they have not pulled out of many projects. They have stayed on those projects, renegotiated, reduced the scope, reduced the cost of it. They've stayed on in the project. So to that extent, to my way of thinking, One Belt, One Road initiative is here to stay, but it is likely to slow down. It is likely to probably look into some kind of transparency if that's what we are looking at. One of the reasons why we didn't go into, one was the sovereignty issue. The other one was all the contracts were not transparent. They were all bilateral. So that is another thing that was also a reason. So in the first, second and third BRI forums that they've had, they have said that they will revisit this and see if they're more transparent and things like that. But on the ground, there are no reasons to believe that that has happened. So to my way of thinking, One Belt, One Road initiative will be there. It will progress slowly, but it will not probably have the gusto with which it started in 2013-14. That is the way I would sum it up.
So this CPEC, like we have been reading reports about it, how this is going to help China, how this is going to change face of Pakistan. What results has it given to them? What is the present status? Because we have been hearing reports about corruption, Pakistan army officers getting involved in it. People even in Pakistan are terming it that they have accepted slavery terms from the Chinese. So what's the status, and is it in any way helping the Chinese or the Pakistanis? Because getting your stuff at the Gwadar port and bringing by it, crossing high mountain valleys and all those things, was it even practical to have this, or was it just to corner India or to just say that we have a link road open?
See, the origins of this you should look at the Karakoram Highway. Karakoram Highway started in 59, finished somewhere around 78, 79, then it doesn't function.
So,
the CPEC, when they planned it, it had two arms coming into Pakistan. One is the eastern route, the other one is the western route via Balochistan. The eastern route is the one where maximum development has taken place as of now. The western route is still under process. If you look at the money allocation of $62 billion, which was supposed to be given to CPEC, almost $35 billion was for thermal power plants.
That Sui gas line area.
Many power plants were supposed to be.
Yeah.
Some of them were actually the early harvest kind of a project. So they did that. And some of them are functioning, some of them are not functioning as of now. I mean, there are issues there. And the cost of production of electricity was far higher than what Pakistan was expecting. The other projects of mainline railway line and the metro, etc., those are again being negotiated. They created a group which sits together and meets, both the sides meet each other and then decide what needs to be done. That's a periodic meeting that takes place. So far, my assessment is that somewhere around $30 to $32 billion has been invested in Pakistan as far as China is concerned in CPEC. CPEC was, to my way of thinking, is not a project which was meant for, I would say, economic benefits of China. To my way of thinking, it is another access to Arabian Sea. That is what they are more important with. So if you look at the map today of India, China there, Pakistan this side, Myanmar this side, you have a China-Pakistan economic corridor coming to the west of India. You have a China-Myanmar economic corridor coming to the east of India.
The string of pearls, as they say.
String of pearls contains other things. As Boothall and Hamilton made this report in 2004, we don't subscribe to that view of string of pearls. In addition, recently the Thailand Prime Minister, when he went to China, has mentioned that they are going to probably create a canal come road, etc., along that Kra Isthmus which they were planning to have earlier. So these are all, if you look at the map and then sit behind and see, you find one line coming to the west, one line coming to the east like this. Basically, it appears that China was wanting to bypass India and come to Indian Ocean region. The origin of this is actually rooted in something known as the Malacca dilemma, which Mr. Hu Jintao had enumerated in 2004. He says Malacca is going to be a dilemma for us because that's a choke point kind of a thing. So these actions will also avoid Malacca. So if you look at it from that strategic point of view, while it could have economic benefits in some form or the other, like for example Gwadar could function as some base at some point in time in future. They have said that they'll create a Chinese city with 50,000 houses and 500,000 people living there. What is the reason why a Chinese city should be created in Gwadar? Right? So it could become a base at some point in time. Not ready as yet. Some point in time it might become. So the aim is strategic. One is strategic, that is to get to the Indian Ocean. Two, you have the economic, some kind of returns will come out of this in any case. May not be to the full extent because Pakistan has been going to China to reschedule the loans, etc. already. So that money is not going to go back to China full. That is a given. But they will get some returns out of it. So I think if you look at it
Good luck
from...
with that, trying to get money from
Yeah,
Pakistan.
at the moment Pakistan itself is looking for money everywhere. So that is going to take a long time.
Yeah.
Because this we predicted even in 2017 when the Dawn paper actually leaked the draft CPEC document, which was studied around that time in great amount of detail. And you found that, the returns, the money that was to be returned by Pakistan will start biting it from the year 2021-22 was the assessment that was made even at that time. So that is happening even now.
Yeah.
They are in no position to actually return that kind of money. So they're going to get into trouble because of that.
So I want to talk about that 20th Congress of the CCP that was held and the impact that had on Chinese politics and on China's external policy. Here's a short primer for our audience before that. The 20th Congress of the Chinese Communist Party CCP was held in October 2022. It was quite naturally seen as a historic occasion, but the high drama that happened made it more than an event. It marked the start of Xi Jinping's third term as the top leader of China and ended the post-Mao convention that top leader retires after serving 2 terms of 5 years each. The closing ceremony video showed Xi's predecessor as General Secretary of the CCP, Hu Jintao, being escorted out of the meeting visibly against his wishes. This was captured on camera and broadcast live, but never shown again on Chinese media. Other top leaders at the event kept calm and carried on, as if the drama was not happening. Xi's control over everything in China started then and is complete now. So is this right? Is Xi's hold complete or is it tenuous right now? What is your reading?
It's a very good question. You see, if you look at that video, Xi Jinping was sitting without any kind of emotion or anything. Mr. Hu Jintao tried to look at some paper. The person next to him tried to tell him not to do that. And then Mr. Hu Jintao went and spoke something to Mr. Xi Jinping. And then he was guided out. That is the video actually it showed, the way it showed it. But then if you look at the results of the 20th Party Congress, you look at the Politburo, the number of people who allegiance to Mr. Xi Jinping. You look at the Central Committee, which is of the 300 people. Look at the way they are actually formed, whose loyalties were to whom, etc. If you look at a detailed analysis, which we did at some point in time, to me it appeared that Xi Jinping was on a strong footing. With all this Politburo Standing Committee, Politburo and the Central Committee and the alternate Central Committee coming up together, if you analyze each and every person in that particular group, one could make out that Xi Jinping is on a strong wicket as far as that is concerned. That is the structure of that entire. Then came the PLA and the Central Military Commission. You see the way that the Central Military Commission was reorganized into that 7 people which are there earlier, 7 people even now. But the way the people were actually put into that vice chairmanship, one of the vice chairmans of Central Military Commission was not in the Central Military Commission earlier. He was brought in newly and put there. And then the bottom 4, which they have, the members that they have, that is again, one of them of course has been now sacked. That is Li Shangfu, was the defense minister. He has been sacked recently, and so that position is yet to be filled. So you find the argument that that particular video was a indication that Mr. Xi Jinping may not be on sure footing. Somehow I don't buy that argument. He was actually sitting very pretty, and you find that the structure, the way he has brought in Politburo Standing Committee, Politburo, the Central Committee, etc.
All owe allegiance to him.
It is most of them owe allegiance to him. So there were reports immediately after the analysts started writing. In China, there used to be some factions which used to be working in this political arena. One was the Shanghai clique, one was the Taitse, which is the Princelings, the other one is the Communist Youth League. Immediately after the 20th Party Congress, analysts had started writing to say that this factionalism in China at least temporarily is gone. It might come back at a later stage when you find the next after 5 years it might come back, but at the moment it is not there as the kind of writing that started appearing. So if you put all this, I don't think Xi Jinping was on a weak wicket on that particular time.
So he didn't either then or now. He hasn't. It hasn't diminished his goals for his goal rather for world domination. It's not impacted at all. Nothing.
That has not impacted. See, the other thing that I want to mention through you to the reader, to the people who are watching this podcast, is that the goals of China are not set by one person. This twin goal, the twin centenary goals, etc., have been actually been there earlier.
Okay.
It is handed over to him. The way he is implementing is different. But most of the things that he is doing today have been handed over to him over a period of time. But he is implementing them in his own way. That is the way I think we need to see this.
So what is the Xi Jinping way?
Xi Jinping way is to ensure whatever tasks have been given to him, whatever the goals have been given to him, push it hard towards achieving it. That is his way of doing it. I would say the previous two leaderships did not push so hard, but he is pushing it hard.
So it's in national interest or is it in his personal interest?
That only Mr. Xi Jinping can answer, but my own understanding is I think both will be there.
Because he's such a powerful leader.
The way he got his third term. A lot of people say unprecedented third term, but I don't say it is unprecedented because Mao Zedong was there for a very long period of time.
But after Mao, there
has not been there, and so it was not unprecedented. Okay. It is a third term he has got. So he has got a third term. He may get a fourth term. We don't know. But the fact of the matter remains, the very fact that he has got a third term and aspiring to have term limits waived. He has already got the term limits waived. So to me, it appears that there is also a personal goal of seeing through China to whatever goals that they have established for themselves. And he seems a personal role in him for that.
But when a leader tries to do something like this, get a third term, fourth term, whatever, and have these, very far-reaching goals, which is world domination and all, I would think a leader like that would try to build alliances. Instead, he's out to crush whatever alliances that could have been done. Isn't it? Don't you see that there's somewhere a misnomer in what a leader aspires for himself and his country?
That is again a good question. If you take your mind back and look at who were all allies of China earlier and who are all allies of China now, do you see a major difference?
See, I would think that one of the major thing is that America has backed out. Europe, nobody wants. Asia has totally crumbled.
Europe, I would request you to rethink on Europe because Europe has got a lot of
only business alliances.
Economic linkages there.
Yeah.
Almost whatever amount of trade that China does with US, equal amount or little more is being done with Europe.
Which they are now rethinking, right? Like Italy has backed out of the...
Italy has backed out of One Belt, One Road initiative.
Yeah, so they backed out.
We are seeing trains going directly to London from China. There's a lot of business interest in rest of the Europe also.
Yeah,
that's how their medicines and
it goes to Rotterdam.
Most
of the
their
trains,
vaccines were reaching like that, right, with those trains. But now they're rethinking many other countries. So I would think that those alliances, some of them are there because you can't just suddenly cut off alliances. But you look at what has happened with the South China. You look at any of those countries, they're subjugated to a large extent, but they're looking out if nobody is there to help. Look at what they've done with Australia, right? So many countries with who they were in alliance with, now they are in a state of not just competing, but literally aggression with many countries.
But look at Australia-China relations now. It had suffered a setback,
Yeah.
but it seems to be coming back to some kind of normalcy as far as trade and other relations.
Yeah.
Politically, there may be issues which I am sure every country has got something or the other. And same is the case with Japan. Same is the case with South Korea. Same is the case with, of course, even Taiwan has got a lot of economic relationship with China.
Correct.
On the economic relationships, I don't think a major setback has happened. On the political issues, yes, there have been some issues that have happened because of which China's political relations seem to be suffering in some point in time. But my own reading is, these are all, phases, I would say. Like, for example, people used to say, some time ago, around 2010-11, the Defense Secretary of US was not allowed entry to China. Somebody used to question me, no, this relationship is going bad. You say, wait for some time. Because what happens is, these are all not permanent. These are all will change as per the situation that is moving around. International relationships are actually not a fixed kind of a thing. It will keep moving, keep manipulating, keep maneuvering. So to that extent, I think we need to wait and watch this.
Is that what you did when you were military attaché there for 3 years? Was it like everything had to be wait and watch because things were very fluid?
There it was quite difficult actually. That
go
time in China was a different China than what it is today. Okay.
Which years were these, sir?
These are 2002 to 2005. Those years were slightly different, basically because that is the time when China was growing in economy. China's military power has just started growing. It has not grown to the extent what it is today. And China was still trying to have good relationships with everybody, including India around that time. That is the time Mr. Vajpayee went, and then, that relationship started mending a little bit. So, situation around that time was slightly different than what it is particularly now. But even then, you could just do things by observing. Because there's no way you could interact with people, etc., which was restricted. So, our interactions with the PLA used to be single window. One contact point used to be there. That is where you need to interact with. That is the way, I think even now they do it that way only. So, most of the things we did by observation and reading. A lot of newspapers and a lot of magazines, when it comes, you read them and then you get to know. When you move around, then you observe and then you do that. One thing we ensured was that, there were occasions when some of the military attachés or naval attachés went closer to PLA establishments, and they had to be taken. They were actually dealt with. So those kind of things we never used to do. Observe clearly, and then wherever you go in civil areas, markets, you can observe a lot of things. So that is how you picked up a lot of stuff, which you could make your mind with, how they think, how they behave, and things like that.
Okay, because it's still like foggy, right? Like with Pakistan, when you think of Pakistan as an adversary, you kind of know the mind of your enemy to some extent. I think people in India, even if we don't have a military background, kind of know how the Pakistani mind works. But with China, there seems to be like a wall, literally. I mean, I don't want to use that word because it's so typical to talk about a wall in China. But then it is like that. I think, how does their mind work? How does it work? Because see, I mean, so many things when Xi Jinping was here, when he was being feted, but the Indian Prime Minister was here, and they were on our borders. They were attacking us at that stage. How does that mind work? How does the Chinese mind work?
Chinese mind draws a lot of their lessons from the history. Like the successful dynasties, the kind of tactics and the kind of thing that they followed, there's a lot of drawdown on that to be used even today.
Subterfuge, Sun Tzu and all that.
Not only Sun Tzu is only one aspect. Sun Tzu is actually talked about art of war, and he had certain stratagems, and they have another thing known as 36 stratagems, which they try to follow. Other than that, also there are a lot of strategies which the successful dynasties which followed earlier seems to have influence in thinking even today. So I think you need to, whenever an action takes place, I think you need to start going back and keep looking at
Those historical contexts.
how it, in what context that it gets fits in, and then how you can analyze it as something that you need to be looking at.
Ah, okay. So that's how one reads the Chinese
That
mind.
is how one needs to read, because most of the thing that happen today is we tend to analyze episodically. Something happens now, you tend to analyze that.
Correct.
But I think you need to go back in history and then link it.
So China's expansionist policies, which are currently on, or their strategic thinking, that also you have to see in a historical context?
I do agree, because there is something known as a weak strong strategy that they used to have in earlier times.
Please explain that.
That is simply, if the central government is strong in China, the territory will expand. If the central government is weak, the territory will shrink. Because that time, of course, they used to go on horses, and then they used to have a limit of expansion. But that is the way it used to function. If the central government is strong, then they'll be pushing, and then the nomads in the peripheral areas will get pushed. When the government became weaker, the nomads they used to call them Xingnu. They used to push towards the center. So this contraction and expansion was something that was there even earlier. So if today, if the central government is powerful in China, you may find that power expanding outward.
So I'm obviously now going to come to Taiwan, sir, now that you've given me the cue. What's going to happen? Because there were some who were saying that, in 2024, and there are so many articles, you must have seen this also, that in 2024, over 50 countries going in for elections. And when the world is busy, China plans its attack. When, whether it was COVID situation, whether it is now, and with America also busy with their domestic election, and with so many countries in Europe, India also, do you see that they will use this period?
It is extremely difficult to predict anything in today's world, because nobody expected Russia to go into Ukraine at some point in time, or nobody expected Hamas to launch attack on Israel. It's very difficult to predict.
So that's what I'm saying.
But
Russia is busy. We have the Ukraine war. You have Red Sea in conflict. You have all these conflict areas going on, and you have elections. So why not?
It is not so simple.
Okay.
The reason for that is Taiwan is across a strait. Okay. Militarily, if you have to do it, then it comes with a lot of other baggage with you. That I don't want to go into the details of it, because you can discuss it till cows come home on that particular issue. But I'm not sure whether China is ready to do that now. Okay. But again, as I said, nothing can be ruled out in today's world, and we'll have to see when it comes to that.
So when you say now, you obviously you're saying it's just a matter of when.
I'm not. I see that you're wanting me to commit on that, but I am not going to commit. Basically because of a reason that it is going to be extremely difficult to predict. It is not only the international situation that one needs to be worried about in an operation like that. China needs to do an amphibious operation in case it wants to forcefully annex Taiwan. That kind of an operation is something which is very, very difficult to plan and execute.
But the intention is there, right?
No, the intention, they have been saying, as per the statements.
Strategically, they may not have, but I'm sure they have a plan of action ready.
They must be having. I'm not saying that they don't have a plan
There
of
is
action.
a war plan in place, but the point is when to do it and what are the repercussions. Is that it?
That may be. We don't know whether the plans exist, plans don't exist, because so far, at least till some time ago, the stated policy was peaceful reunification of Taiwan. That was what was being talked about. And they always used to say, even now they are saying it, that we don't rule out force. These two things come simultaneously
Like
in
Hong Kong.
most of the statements. Hong Kong was a different ball game because Hong Kong was given
There
to
was
them back as their own territory.
But a peaceful, and initially they had said that we will not, it won't be that kind of a unification where Hong
No,
Kong
they
will
said
be part
one
of
country,
it.
two systems.
Yeah.
That one country, two system didn't work very well in Hong Kong. Therefore, it had repercussions in the previous election in
Didn't
Taiwan.
work well means what? It didn't work well as far as China is concerned. It didn't work well.
No, the way it was perceived, like for example, when they passed that Hong Kong security law in 2019, that is the time elections in Taiwan were supposed to take place. Okay, and the way that China enforced that law and the protests that came up post that law was being implemented, actually told. Conveyed to the, I think probably to the Taiwan people that this one country two systems is not going to work, and that seems to have had an implication on the election results around that time. A lot of people have written on it. I mean, it's all available. You can read it. So that one country two systems is something which is not working as far as Hong Kong is concerned. The same thing has been offered to Taiwan also, one country two systems. But I think that is also not going to work. I mean, that is going to be difficult to make it work.
Okay.
Sir, you've talked about Taiwan, their relations. Now coming back again to this 2020 standoff, sir, you said we have to be careful along the LAC, and like you've headed the triple CS also, sir. You have watched China very closely. DA and post after that all the tenures. You were also the 3 Corps commander. Now we have been talking to the Chinese. Today we interviewed the chief. He said the situation is stable, but like not fully sorted out.
Yeah.
So where do we go from here? Where can things go? Because we see in between there are activities in Bhutan where they want to come very close to our territory. We see activities in Arunachal along that border, in eastern Ladakh. So where do we go from here? What can we expect in coming days? As ma'am said that this is the time the whole world is busy. Even we are getting into that Arabian Sea, Red Sea turmoil. The Americans are getting regularly attacked by their warships are getting attacked. Today they have casualties. They have suffered casualties in Jordan. There is so much of turmoil. So here we have a live. The standoff is entering 4th year. Where do we go from here?
See, we have made one thing clear to the Chinese side, that unless we have some stability on the line of actual control, and we go back to the pre-2020 incident positions, and we go through the 3 process of disengagement, de-escalation, and then moving back, things are not going to move politically. This has been conveyed many number of times, both in track 1, officially, track 1.5, 2, everything we have. So there, that negotiations may take place, negotiations may give some results, we don't know at this point in time. Negotiations are on, that's what we know. That is why I said, since the line of actual control is not a clearly demarcated line on ground, and both the sides seems to have some differences on it, we need to be careful in ensuring that such incident that happened in, say, both in Dolam in 2017 and Galwan in 2020 do not occur again. In the sense that patrols are going, if they come on a face-off, we need to ensure that they don't escalate to the level that it went into Galwan kind of incident. And the second thing that we need to be looking at is more closely at the line of actual control is to ensure that no incursions or no transgressions take place along the line of actual control. This is as far as the line of actual control and the military kind of things. In the meanwhile, you improve your capabilities, you improve your infrastructure. Those things should continue normally.
That both sides are doing.
Which they are continuing normally. This is one side of the story. The other side is we have dependencies on China economically, and so you find the trade deficit increasing. There again, you need to do a lot of work on, the PLA scheme government has announced. That is something which is starting to catch speed now. There are a lot of things the Ministry of Defense has come out with a negative list of not importing from anywhere else so that, you improve the capabilities within the country. So within the country, you need to improve the capabilities to sustain yourself, and try to become economically stronger. Manufacturing needs to improve. Those things are being looked into on the different scale. So it is not one particular aspect of thing that you need to look at when you want to deal with this kind of a issue. You need to have a holistic kind of an approach where you have the military doing its job, the government doing its job, the industry doing its job. It is a kind of a, I would say, we keep saying it, whole of a nation approach. I think this needs a whole of a nation approach to do this.
So you
And that is what is on at this point.
Multi-pronged approach, yes. You talked about track 1, track 1.5. To our viewers and listeners, could you explain what are these tracks? You've been part of track 2 also. So what are these tracks? Track 1, track 2?
Track 1 is typically official to official.
Okay.
In the sense that, if representative of Ministry of External Affairs from Indian side and the Ministry of MOFA, they call it, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China side, officials, they talk to each other. That is track 1. Anything that happens between government to government, government officials to government officials, it is track 1. Track 1.5 is slightly lower in the sense that there may be some participation of the officials, but there will be academics, there will be people from the industry, people like that could be there, depending on the subject that you discuss with. That is 1.5. Track 2 is purely academical, industrialists, those kind of a grouping. That think tanks, only think tanks, and not anybody, any participation from the government. That is track 2. So
Right.
track 1, 1.5 and track 2 are generally known as like this.
So can you tell us that what is the role that diplomacy plays in diffusing these kind of volatile situation that we have on the line of actual control?
Plenty. I mean, you take your mind back to, say, 2017, the moment that incident happened, the other resolutions took place on the diplomatic level. Similarly, you mentioned about the border incidents taking place when Mr. Xi Jinping was visiting, Mr. Li Keqiang was visiting here. Those again got resolved by diplomacy. So diplomacy plays a very major role in dealing with this, definitely. And over a period of time, what we get to see is that it is both the diplomacy and the military going hand in hand actually is working out better. Like, for example, the talks on the ground in Galwan are actually corps commander level talks. It's the military to military level talks. But there is a foreign ministry representative out there. So it is a joint kind of an effort there also, which works very well. And diplomacy has actually been the bedrock of all the resolutions that we have been doing.
What do we expect from them? Because as journalists, as laymen, we keep reading, oh, this is the 16th round of talk. This is the 36th. So people wonder, what are these talks achieving? There's just talk. We have not had a change.
Sir, along with that, a lot of people ask that, since you know China better than many of us do, what did the Chinese leadership achieve by doing what it did in 2020? What was the outcome for them? Like we responded very strongly, swiftly to whatever they did, and Galwan I've seen a lot of people in foreign countries also talking about a strong Indian response. And but what did China achieve by doing this?
That is why I said it's a one-off case which went wrong there on the face-offs when it happened. What they achieved is something which what they achieved is something that we will not be able to predict. But what we can predict now is what they are doing. After Galwan happened, look at the way they have actually gone about creating infrastructure for people to stay, troops to stay in Eastern Bloc, etc.
Is that a response to the Kailash operations of August 29 that these guys are like, did they find
29?
us August
The
29?
29th August, when we occupied
2020, when
Kailash
we
ranges.
occupied the Kailash ranges. Is that a response to that they have started building infrastructure so fast and so close to
No,
the
you
enemy?
need to take your mind back even before that. When they came into Pankungso, you found that they had
2020,
created...
sir?
Same 2020. When they came into Pankungso, they came to the Finger Four. Then they had started creating helipads, temporary structures for staying, etc. They had already started that. But as part of disengagement, they also pulled it out. They took all those and went back. I think what has happened is that till some time back, we used to wonder why Chinese have not created any defenses across and things like that. So at that time, my assessment used to be that, it will happen in time. Whenever the correct time comes up, it will happen. So I think now what has happened is that because of the incident that we have had, both Dolam as well as Galwan, that seems to have given them the impetus to improve the infrastructure both in eastern Ladakh and in other areas, and also to create some accommodation for troops to come and stay. So that is something that has happened as a part of thing. What they achieved out of Galwan is something which is very difficult to mention. Like, for example, a lot of interviews have taken place in which people have said that, even the number of casualties that they suffered cannot be predicted very clearly. We don't know, actually speaking. It's very difficult to predict because we saw some structures going, but how many people died, how many people survived, we don't know. That must have been in the hospital, and they have claimed only 4 of them died. So it's very difficult to actually predict these things, actually.
Also, would I ask, sir, what are these talks, the several rounds of talks?
That question you are on.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what. The problem I find is in our impatience.
Our impatience, we waited how many years?
Okay. Please take your mind back to Samdrungcho. How many years did you wait? You waited 7 years. So this is not new.
Okay.
That is the point I was wanting to tell you. And second thing is, we should not be in a hurry to get into a solution. Because in the process of trying to look for a solution very quickly, you may tend to compromise, which we don't want.
And sir, coming to this point of being impatient, a lot of people say that we see on social media people commenting on these issues that India may want to resolve this ongoing standoff before elections. By the time we go into elections, this should be resolved. Is that?
I'm not sure. I don't think the government, is thinking on those lines. I think government is looking at our country's interests, and I don't think they are going to probably give up on anything because of elections are coming or otherwise. I don't see that. At least I don't see that. The reason why I'm telling you is, you will also hear this. The talks went for 12 hours. Talks went for 14 hours.
14 hours.
You can straight away reduce that 14 hours period to 50% because interpretation has to take place.
Okay. Language.
Right? So I am saying something, somebody else has to interpret. So that takes time. So 50% of the time actually is taken off from that. So it comes to 7 hours. So you have, if you are 7 hours, you will have some break in between. So you look at it, generally it comes to about 4 to 5 hours of real talking, actually speaking. So don't get worried by this long hours of talks, etc. Don't also get worried by 20th level of 20th round has happened, 21st round have happened. We should get what we want. So let it take 100 rounds, it doesn't matter. That is what we need to be looking at. And an example, as I quoted you, take for example Samdrungcho. It happened in 86. Finally, by the time we resolved it, it was I think 93 or 94. So we need to have patience.
So what do we actually want? I mean, like with Pakistan, we say, we know we want POK back. You know what I mean? We in the sense, like most Indians would say, हमको ये वापस लेना है. हमको अगर हमारे 10 लोग मारे तो उनका 20 लोग मारना चाहिए. You know what I mean? Like,
I get that.
But with China,
tit for tat, kind of a behavior.
Yeah. So most Indians know what India's goal is. What do we know as far as China is concerned? We want this 52, 56, 62. What is the benchmark that we have?
Okay. There are two things that we need to understand. One is the boundary question to be resolved in full is not going to be easy. It is going to take time. It is very complex. Each sector has got a different connotation, and each sector is difficult by itself. Okay. What we have been telling the Chinese post 2020 is simply that let us come to an understanding that on the line of actual control, we will not, both the sides will not change the status quo unilaterally. We want this kind of an assurance so that at least the LAC is stable. The other thing that we have been telling them in fact, our foreign minister has been telling them very frequently wherever he has been asked about this, is that we are not looking at the resolution of the boundary today to start rest of the things. We are looking for far less, is what he has been saying. That far less is basically to come to an understanding on line of actual control that we will not change the status quo unilaterally and we will maintain peace and tranquility along the line of actual control, which has been signed in all the agreement that we have signed from 1993, 96, 2005, 2013, etc. So that is something that if it could be done, then we can think of looking at other issues going forward. But since that is not happening, that is the thing that we need to be insisting on, to say that come to this at least, so that then we can make a move forward.
Sir, recently, about 4-5 months back, we had gone to the LAC, close to the LAC, and we saw a lot of indigenous weapon systems deployed there, the Dhanush guns, the vehicles and all. China also in last few decades has come to a point where it is now, it first developed a military muscle in military hardware manufacturing. And today it is not just using them, it's also exporting them to different countries, and it's also used as military diplomacy. A lot of our neighboring countries have been getting their weapon systems and all. How important is it for India to get into that position?
It is extremely important. And the process of this started about almost 10 years ago. That is why you find this defense ministry coming out with negative list, etc., which you cannot import. The reason for that is those things can be developed indigenously or produced indigenously within the country. And slowly we need to increase that percentage. Okay? Even today, we have a dependence on Russian equipment. And it is going to persist for some more time. It is not going to go overnight. Okay. Slowly and steadily, we have to start building things in the country. So that is why you find we went in for technology transfer from GE 414 for the aircraft engines, which was an issue. And we are trying to produce indigenous weapon systems, like artillery guns have started getting produced in India, light tanks have started producing in India. And so the aim is to become self-sufficient, at least for our requirements. Combined with that is also the export. Now, there was a report by DRDO chief, I think he gave an interview somewhere a couple of days ago.
To ANI.
He has said that we have 500,000 crores worth of stuff has been exported in the recent past. So
given to the Indian Armed Forces.
Given to the Indian Armed Forces. So the aim is to keep increasing the indigenous content in all our weapon systems, so that we are not dependent on anybody when the time comes. Otherwise, what happens? If you are dependent, something goes wrong on the border, you have to keep rushing to get spares, you have to keep rushing to get ammunition, you have to keep getting to rush many other things. So those things need to be avoided. And second thing is, the moment you start buying things from abroad, you use a lot of foreign exchange. They're expensive and you use a lot of foreign exchange. So the defense budget, if you want to make what they call as maximum bang for the buck, is something that if you want to have, then start making things indigenously and within the country. And that is what we have been concentrating on for the last at least 10 years, I can see it. Even before that we started, but I think it has gained momentum in the last 10 years to a large extent. And we are ensuring that, don't pick up things from outside if you can produce it in the country.
And sir, this reminds me that this indigenization of weapons, along with that, recently indigenization of tourism was also a big issue, because people were talking about that instead of going to Maldives, we should go to
that is because of certain other issues.
And that is because of the way the Maldivian leadership was behaving at that time, and we all
visited China. So
he
there's a
visited China
Chinese
soon
element
after,
also.
and then he again, after he came back, he reiterated that Indians should go out from this, vacate my country, and I have fought these elections on basis of this, and we don't want Indians. Like, a lot of people ask us, sir, and how is it going to help Maldives, and how does it help China to be present there? Because there have been reports that research vessels, military vessels would follow later. So how does it help China, and how does it help Maldives?
It helped China.
And how does it impact India negatively?
Right. It helped China definitely, because their presence in the Indian Ocean will increase. Okay. Now, Sri Lanka has said that for 1 year they will not allow Chinese ships to Chinese.
with after what happened with Hambantota.
Yeah. So they have said that they will not come for 1 year. For Chinese, definitely there is a benefit. But for if you look at the Maldivian polity, depending on who's in the leadership, there has been shift in the leanings towards either India or China. So the previous regime was considered to be closer to India, and now this one has started going to China. So I think our leadership will have the maturity to handle this. I don't want to get into how they'll handle it. No, that's their issue. But as far as China is concerned, China will definitely benefit in case they are able to they are allowed to come and dock in, say, Maldives. And their influence in Indian Ocean region to that extent will definitely start increasing.
Why is it of importance to China? Firstly, the Indian Ocean region. You need to tell our viewers and our listeners. This competing interests between the Indian Navy and the Chinese Navy in this region, in the Indian Ocean region. How significant is the threat that Chinese ships in this area? I think there are now 5 or 6 they have in the Indian
They
Ocean
always
region.
have the.
No, they always have anywhere between 6 to 11.
6
6
to
to
11.
11.
That is there in the Indian Ocean region permanently, because some of them going to this anti-piracy mission, some of them will be returning, some of them will be doing some port call somewhere. So anywhere, and some research vessels will be operating in Indian Ocean region. Anywhere between 6 to 11, you can expect at any point.
And now there are these anti-piracy missions that India is undertaking in this
we have
region.
deployed almost about 10 ships now.
So now, tell us about the situation where these two countries are have competing interests in the Indian Ocean region. Why? And why is China playing that role in the Indian Ocean region?
One is that, let me first deal with China first. For us, Indian Ocean region is definitely important, because that is where our trade and everything takes place, a lot of it. And so we need to be having that influence. As far as China is concerned, they have something known as a two oceans theory. Okay, the two ocean theory is, one is Pacific Island, one is the Indian Ocean. And Indian Ocean theater is the secondary theater to the Pacific. And that is the way they look at it. They have something known as 2 seas and 3 boundaries kind of a concept. 3 boundaries are, one is the North Korean boundary, one is the Indian boundary, and Vietnam. That is one. And then the 2 seas that they have, Pacific and the
Indian Ocean
region. That is one aspect of it. The second aspect is, as I told you, if Chinese are to become world power, you have to have presence all across the world. If you don't have that, then you will not be able to influence incident that could happen anywhere. Like, for example, today, if you look at the US, it has got 800 bases, small and big, all over the world. So that is how US will be able to react to any incident that is happening anywhere close to these bases quickly. So that is the way you need to have, if you want to have worldwide influence, that is the way you need to operate. So if you have to operate like that, then China cannot be remain restricted. If you want to become a world power, then he can't be restricted only to, say, West Pacific Ocean. So it will increase. So he has to come to Indian Ocean region, he has to move towards Guam, and because he has got the claim of first island chain, second island chain. If he goes to second island chain, it will go to Guam, and then beyond.
But there's the US presence in Guam.
Guam, of course, is a US base. So that's why you find many of the missiles, when they test and say this is a Guam killer. DF-26, when they tested, they said it's a Guam killer. So something will say it's an aircraft killer. So that is basically the mindset. Okay. So to that extent, if you see, Indian Ocean will become at some point in time an important ocean for China. So one of the Chinese admirals or generals actually, he said about 15 years ago, he said that Indian Ocean is not India's ocean. So to that extent, the interest of China in Indian Ocean will be there and will keep increasing. And our interest is definitely there, because we are a resident power in Indian Ocean region, and most of our trade happens through Indian Ocean region, and we have our own relationships in this region. So we need our own influence. So you will find, as we go by, you will find this competition
Heating up?
is going to be heating up, in the sense it may not become very physical, but you'll find this push and pull happening, the push and pull for influence happening. So that is something I think in the Indian Ocean region.
And expanding to Africa, you see?
Yeah, but see, expanding to Africa is already taking place. You look
Yeah.
at the way China has gone into Africa with many of the projects and other things, and also with fishing. They do a lot of fishing on the shores of eastern shores of Africa. So there are a lot of things that are happening even now. So we need to be prepared to handle this, and I'm sure our Navy is taking care of it.
So I'll come to the point about China provoking India as far as maps are concerned. I'm sure it happened when you were there too. So do the Chinese get provoked at all with regard to the map, or is it India which gets sensitive? I mean, they keep doing this, and then the chief minister of Arunachal, whoever is the chief minister, then has to issue a counter, and then there is social media which erupts. Then there is, somebody else the political leadership. Then there's opposition in India. Parallelly, does that happen in China among people there? Do people even bother?
See, when I was in China, I used to see a lot of maps of India showing the Indian territory wrongly. Okay. We used to point out whenever, at least in the official meetings, we used to point out to say that the map is incorrect. But Chinese are very sensitive to their territory being shown as something else. Like, for example, about few years ago, maybe 4 years ago, many of the airlines which showed Taiwan as a different country were not allowed to fly unless they showed Taiwan as part of China. Chinese are extremely sensitive to this. So they actually then take actions to ensure that it is shown as per their perception of that territory. So that is something that they are very sensitive to.
Okay. So they will continue to do this?
They will continue to do that. And you would have known the visa issue.
The staple visa.
Staple visas. You find the, with watermark of Arunachal being part of China, etc., were done by them earlier also. But then...
You don't see them becoming pragmatic or realistic about the ground situation, even with regard to Kashmir. They are not going to change their view.
I don't think they'll change their view.
But they react very strongly to the coverage that happens about them in Indian media.
Not only in Indian media, anywhere. It is not on that kind of a reaction which you see is not restricted
in
only
earlier
to India.
talks they would come and say that your media is very aggressive about us.
Yeah, but then post 2017 Dolam issue, their media became aggressive. That is the first time in 2017 when Dolam was happening that their media went to town first. And from that time onward, their media has been active. So now, of course, they don't have a reason to say that your media is doing this, therefore things are going out of hand. Their media is also equally to be responsible.
Should we go on to the chip war
Okay.
and the between US and China and now Foxconn and India? Where do you see this going?
See, the technology denial regime, which is generally being put into place to deny technology to China, has resulted in two things. One, Chinese have started investing more in SMIC, the semiconductor manufacturing industry of China. The investments into SMIC has gone tremendously high. And there have been reports that they have been able to produce mobile phones with 7 nanometers chips. Even after the technology was being denied, there must have been some leaks somewhere. Huawei has produced that. I think Mate 60 is the phone, I think. That is one aspect of it, that they are trying to build things within their own country. But what is holding them back is actually the lithography machines which are required to make these chips, which the Netherlands has to give. ASML from Netherlands is the major company which supplies these things, and there are restrictions on that lithography machines going to China. That is where the problem lies as of now. In between, US enacted a CHIPS Act. They also started making foundries on the soil of US. In fact, TSMC of Taiwan is making that factory. And they'll start making it in 4-5 years' time. In between, we have started with Micron in Gujarat. And Foxconn is again coming up in some form. So what has happened is the supply chain disruptions that we faced during COVID and beyond has brought in a sense that these things can't. The critical dependencies need to be avoided. Therefore, you find diversification. Therefore, you find. I mean, there are many terms that you can say: friendshoring, onshoring, nearshoring. Whole lot of terms are coming up. The basic idea is that you should not be dependent on one particular source for your critical requirements. So that is why you find this thing happening all over the world. And to that extent, India seems to be in a better place, basically because people are looking at India at a more friendly manner. And you find people wanting to invest here, people want to come and establish manufacturing facilities here. So slowly and steadily, it is not going to happen overnight. So we should not have any hopes that tomorrow somebody comes and says, I'm establishing a factory here and day after tomorrow the chips will start coming out. No. It will take time. We need to have that patience. But as the time goes by, you will find from the lesser high technology things that are required to make the chips, it will start progressing and you will find indigenous capabilities building up. But that is not to say that China will not be strong in chips. That point we need to keep in mind. Today, for most of our auto components, which are coming from China, it comes with the Chinese chips. And Chinese volumes are very high. They produced, I think, last year, 352 billion chips in a year, which means approximately 1 billion chips in a day. That is the kind of volumes we need to be looking at.
Which is what do you think? 3 years, 5 years? How long do you think that will take? Yeah.
10 years, minimum.
10 years.
That is minimum I'm talking about. The volumes are really high in China. That is the way that they actually conquered the world market by volumes made.
When did they start?
They started a long time ago. They didn't start now. They were taking it easy because the world was
Dependent on them.
And they were able to get what they wanted to get. But when things are getting denied, I think they have started investing more internally to build their chips.
So forget about competition. We can't even meet the requirements for another 10 years, what you're saying.
No, that is not the thing. Another point I want to convey to the readers and convey to the listeners and the people
Viewers.
who are watching is that for most of your applications today in the country, you don't need such high-end chips. Okay, you need anywhere between 28 and beyond is good enough. The 7532 nanometer chips are required only for very high-end applications. For your normal running, like your TVs, your washing machines and everything else, you need much higher nanometer chips, which can be produced. That should not be a problem. So what the competition seems to be actually in this high-end chips, where to deny this high-end chips to China, basically to ensure that they don't develop in science and technology too much. That seems to be the aim. But for many of the functions, you need much higher nanometer chips.
Okay. When you were posted in China, sir, tell us what it is like for an Indian military officer to be living in China, in Beijing. What was life like there?
Is there shadowing like what happens in India
Pakistan
and Pakistan?
No, I think Chinese are a little more sophisticated than that. I'm sure they must be watching us. I don't deny that. But it was far more sophisticated than what happens in Pakistan.
I'm sure your phone was listened into.
That we were careful in any case, not to use it for purposes other than what is minimally required. And in any case, those days, phones were a rarity. Phones had just started coming in that time. Life in China was not difficult. I mean, that should be a surprise to many, but if you look at the societies of both China and India, I don't see a major difference. We are attached to our families very much, unlike some other countries. They are also attached to their families very much. But Western culture was creeping in that time into China, and I'm sure it is creeping into India also in some form. As a person, when I was moving around in Beijing or any other town, in fact, I traveled almost 80% of China during that time and beyond, one didn't find a problem. If you had known the language, you could easily go through any of the places. The other thing is the availability of things in China at that point in time. China was coming out of that old communist kind of old, I would say, restricted kind of living that they had at that point in time. They were slowly coming out at that time, and things were improving quite a bit. Indian stores had started coming up, and it's easier. The first question they used to ask me was, "Are you from Pakistan?" Because we look alike.
And they are more used to seeing Pakistani.
Indians and Pakistanis are, generally look alike, and so look similar. And so they used to ask, "Are you from Pakistan?" The moment I used to say I am from India, they used to start singing one song, "Main awara hu."
Oh God.
So
Like the Russians.
Raj Kapoor was probably the best ambassador we had during the 60s and 50s.
मेरा जूता है जापानी, पतलून हिंदुस्तानी,
Pakistani फिर भी सर पे लाल टोपी रूसी फिर भी दिल है हिंदुस्तानी. So where is the Chinese in this?
It's not the question of Chinese.
But
it
that
resonates. It resonates with their familial kind of behavior and the social kind of behavior. So
Okay.
that is why you find not only in China, Russia, North Korea, and any of these places which had this communist ideology at that time, Raj Kapoor's films are very, very popular. So that used to be the trend. Recently, you find Dangal was a huge hit in China.
Yeah, correct. Yes.
Okay.
Even in Japan.
The reason for that is simple. I told you, the familiar relations between in that society and in our society are almost similar. So
Okay.
what appeals to them, what appeals to us as a society, appeals to them also.
So the success story of a small time person or a small,
that shows the struggle, that
Okay.
shows the way the person has come up in life. They identify with that kind
So
of.
when you do your track 2 level and when you meet with the Chinese, is there curiosity about Indian society like, say the Pakistani track 2, they want to know about Indian food, Indian movies. Is that kind of thing with the Chinese
That
too?
is slightly less.
Less.
Because the food habits are entirely different. Our food habits and Chinese food habits are entirely different. The Chinese we get here is Indianized Chinese. Mainly we
Correct.
get. Unless you
But
get the original.
There's nothing about like, say, when you meet the Pakistanis, they are concerned about, or they want to know about Indian fashion, they want to shop in India. But there's nothing like that about the Chinese, right? They don't want to come and shop in India. They don't want to see tourist places in India.
There are two things to it. One is they have a sense of pride. Okay. They feel that, China is the best and everything is available in China. So why would you go and buy anything from anywhere? That is one way of thinking, because when I was there, one of the ladies who were working at our home used to ask me, "Why have you brought so many shirts from India? You get better shirts here." That is the kind of pride that they had in them. They have it even now. I mean, that you can't fault them for it because it's a national pride. We also have a national pride, which is okay. And in the track 2 dialogues, I don't think this social kind of thing get discussed much.
Okay.
Even the offlines, I mean, on the sidelines when you keep discussing informally also, I don't think we discuss these things.
Like I've always seen that when I meet with, say, a Korean, when I meet with the Japanese or Indonesian, Malaysian, I'm just talking right now about the ASEAN group, forget about anybody anywhere else. There is a curiosity to know, to interact with Indians, to ask them about various things. Like you'll find somebody asking about the Indian caste system if you're talking about Indonesians. They'll ask you about that. They'll ask you about Bodh Gaya. If you're talking to the Japanese, even the Koreans will ask you, though there wasn't much of interaction with the Koreans. But with the Chinese, you will say that they hardly talk to you. There's hardly any interaction or curiosity about India. Is that just restricted to India, or are they genuinely not interested in anybody other than themselves? So inward looking.
I get a feeling two things happen. One is, there has been a lot of, certain things don't work in China. Like WhatsApp doesn't work in China. Google doesn't work in China.
Twitter doesn't work.
Twitter doesn't work in China. So to some extent, the firewalling is something which could, but a lot of people travel out from China.
Correct.
They see a lot of things.
Yes.
They see a lot of things.
Yeah.
But you will also always see when the Chinese tourists go out, they'll always travel in a group.
Yeah.
So they have a guy who holds the flag and then guides them around wherever they need to go. That is basically because of the language issues that they have. That is one issue. And second thing is it's better to keep it under a group so that, it can be better controlled. So they see things from outside. They go to Western countries. They go to all kinds of countries. In fact, 2019, I was in Turkey. Busloads of Chinese were there. That was before COVID. But even in spite of that, I don't think they are very keen on knowing things about India. Because somebody was telling me recently in one of the dialogues, when somebody showed a video of Mumbai back home, the exclamation was, "Oh, Mumbai is like this." Otherwise, the sense that they have is, India is still backward. India is still, a developing country kind of a thing. So to that extent, I don't think that kind of inquisitiveness is still there in them.
Yeah, I wonder when that kind of subtle aggression in not admitting that India is a rising power, when that will end, or not wanting to acknowledge also that we could be. I guess nobody likes a neighbor to become more powerful or somewhat
No, we do.
aspiring to be powerful.
We do. We want our neighbors to do well.
Oh, that's what we say. Yes.
No, but we definitely mean it. And if you look at the kind of things we have done in the neighborhood in the last few years, have a look at it. You'll come to know yourself.
Yeah.
So we have that neighborhood first policy. So that is something that we do.
Do people in China ever talk about that they would have been better off being a democracy? Is that conversation
No.
even a part of it?
No, you will never get that conversation anywhere. You will never get that conversation basically because they feel that the kind of standard of living that they have is because of the Communist Party of China. So you will not have that feeling coming up anywhere saying that, we need democracy and things like that. There are protests in China, by the way. Those protests are not for democracy. It will be for environment. It will be for certain kind of land being taken away for development. It could be for environmental reasons. It could be pollution. Whole lot of things could be there. But this one is not there.
The next 5 years, where do you see India-China relations going? And that will be my last question.
No problem. As I see it, I don't think that it is going to improve much. Basically because unless we have made this precondition that unless the boundary line of actual control comes to some kind of stability, and we are not talking about resolving the boundary, that will come much later. Unless that is a prerequisite, unless that happens, I don't see this relationship going very far.
Oh, before I end, I have to ask you about the Dalai Lama question, since we are talking about China. One would naturally ask, because China said that they should be given the chance to choose the next Dalai Lama. And of
They
course,
have not said they should be given the chance.
they should.
They said they will.
They will choose the next Dalai Lama. So how do you see that panning out?
See, that is a very... we are actually looking in the future. And His Holiness Dalai Lama himself has said many times, many things about his succession. And Chinese are very clear in their mind that they are the ones who are empowered to do this. US has passed acts on this particular thing to say that, the Tibetan people should have a say in so it is all up in the air at this point in time.
And India can't take a stand on this, right?
I won't say whether they can take a stand or not. That is for the government to decide what they want to do. But you need to go back in history and see the circumstances under which we gave asylum to His Holiness Dalai Lama. And that was on the premise that he will not carry out political activities. So that is one of the reasons why he has already abdicated the political powers to the Central Tibetan administration, and he has got only the religious things that he does. So to that extent, I don't think we are going to... our thing was on compassion, on other things, on moral grounds, etc. We gave him the asylum. I don't think that we are, in any case, it's a very difficult thing to say at this point in time. Everything is up in the air for the future, but I think we'll have to wait and see as to how that pans out.
Right. Thank you, sir, from Ajit's behalf and my behalf. Thank you so much for being part of the podcast.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for watching or listening to this edition of ANI Podcast with Smita Prakash. Do like or subscribe on whichever channel you have seen this or heard this. Namaste, Jai Hind. Click here to watch the previous episodes.